Okay, everybody, welcome back. We're going to start off after the first break. The next talk is going to be network automation and baby steps from my colleague here, Joseph Nicholson. He's not just my colleague, he's also my friend. If you look at the program committee, the slides I was sending, or the spreadsheet that Marcel and Alex and I were working off, all of them had scores, various levels, but this one, straight across this, Mark asked for this talk. He invited this person. So it's really a pleasure to have Joseph coming all the way from Dallas. He's a great friend of mine. We've worked a lot into lots of conferences. So please welcome to the stage and enjoy.
Good morning. I hope everybody's doing okay today. This is the third time I've done this presentation now, and I feel like the title is getting a little condescending at this point, but network automation and small incremental steps doesn't sound the same, so I think I'm going to keep it for a little bit longer. All right, before I get going on the good stuff, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Joseph Nicholson. I have about 26 years worth of network engineering experience. 19 of that has been with NTT Data. I worked my way up from the NOC all the way into network operations, and for about a little bit over a year now, I've been in the network scaling group. For the last 5 years, my primary focus has been on network automation. NTT Data, if you don't know who we are, we're a tier 1 transit provider. Our ASN is 2914. We've been around for quite a while now. Our network spans 5 continents, 40 countries, and 90 POPs, including a location here in Toronto. Services we offer: IP transit, virtual link, global virtual link, and DDoS protection. Our port speeds are 1 gig, 10 gig, 100 gig, and 400 gig. We have about 800 network elements. 250 of those are split between our core and our aggregation layers. That has 2 vendors in that layer, or in those on the backbone itself, those routers. We also have DWDM equipment, about 100 shelves across 2 vendors. That comprises of transponders and line systems. We also started rolling out DCO to connect the routers directly from the routers to the line systems itself. So that's a newer thing we've been working on. All right, that's who we are, that's who I am. Now the project I'm going to talk about today is actually 3 projects, but I'm kind of combining it all into one because it all follows the same flow. About I think 2020, 2021. Unfortunately, I didn't record the date on that one, so I'm kind of guessing at this point. It's been a while now. I realized we kind of need a new and interesting operational data. We have stats data. We have some basic information on the routers and their resources. But there's a lot of things and a lot of issues we ran across in the intervening years where we just don't have data for it. We've had issues where our configurations get too large and the router has a trouble handling that. And then we don't really know how large the configs are across the network. We don't have any timeline history of them going up and seeing like where are we going to hit the next break point if the vendor does this to fix it and gives us more database space in our config database, or we have more disk space on the hard drive for the next iteration of the routers. Like what are we going to hit that point sometime in the future, and we need to get more proactive about that. So things like that we've run into, and we just don't have the data for it. Also at the time, I knew a little bit of Python, and I wanted to learn how to connect to the routers, how to grab information out of the routers, and go do things with that information. And so this seemed like a really good opportunity to merge those 2 together, and I was fortunately given the opportunity to spend as much time as I needed to figure out how to do a lot of this stuff. I spread this across 3 repositories, like I said earlier. One was ASN-based data, route counts from BGP neighbor sessions. How much are we receiving for them? How many routes are we accepting? How much are we sending to them? Things like that. The second one was LSP-based data. If you guys are familiar with MPLS and LSPs, there's a long list of information on there. I sort of made it a challenge to myself to see if I could grab that information and figure out a way to use it within our statistics system. Also, ops data is just a catch-all for anything else, mainly the route table counts, the disk sizes, things like that. These are Python-based scripts, like I said. Again, there's a few examples down here: route table counts, router disk space, router config size, customer prefix list config size. Our router configs our router configs are 96% customer prefix lists. They're that huge, and so it's kind of nice to see what the separation is. How big are the customer prefix lists, and then how big the rest of the config is. So it's really kind of nice to sometimes to see that broken out. Okay, so version 1 back in 2020, 2021, started out with data collection via screen scraping. Started using netmiko. It's a fantastic module that allows you to go in and make it really easy to just give it a show command and go grab that data and it'll just give it to you. I use that in conjunction with the textfsm framework. Textfsm is a bunch of regex templates that will take that unstructured data and put it into a structure and give it back to you so you can go do things with it. And also the Confluent Kafka module I was using as well. Those are the 3 main ones. I used a bunch of other ones in Python, but those were the 3 big ones. And Kafka is a message bus, so it allows you to queue those things up for the helper scripts to come along and put it into the database. The access for the stats themselves were done via the pivot, imply pivot UI. That's what we've settled on for the dashboard. Throughout this process, we have a production system and a staging system, and I was messing with the staging system a lot, and I kept asking the DB admin, hey, can you make this change or make this update? He just gave me access to the stupid thing and made me go figure it out myself. So at the time, that was really kind of annoying, but in the long run, as we'll see here in a little bit, that actually worked out to my benefit. But I got to go learn how to figure out how all that works in the back end, how to manipulate that, and figure out, you know, on my own, on the fly, how the things I'm doing, how they affect through or work through the system from the time I pull it out of the router to the time it ends up in the UI, and that was very beneficial to me, I think. And the original way this was initiated was via cron on my own personal account on our jump server. The second version came about a few years later. I wasn't idle between these 2 versions. There was a long period of time. I was doing a lot of, version 1 had a lot of issues. I spent a lot of time fixing textfsm templates. The one thing I forgot to mention is the default repository for network to code for textfsm didn't have any templates I could use. It's got a ton of templates across many vendors, but that's a lot of standard information. You want interface stats, you want power metrics, you want, you know, whatever you can think of normally. It's all there. But a lot of what I was looking for is not there, and it's all bespoke to what I'm working on. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out more advanced Python, textfsm, the Druid database stuff, and more things than I probably forgot at this point. So when version 2 came around, I kind of got tired of fighting with textfsm, and I started talking about looking at a way to get structured data from the router directly as opposed to pulling it out and figuring out how to structure it myself. And that's where Netconf comes into play. We weren't using Netconf, we were just using straight SNMP. So I had to go figure out, okay, how are we going to deploy Netconf? You know, this is a major protocol we're putting on a global network. This is not necessarily something that we can just flick on and go. You know, I had to figure out how to secure it. I had to figure out, like, is just doing this 8 lines of code going to be enough, or do we need to do more than that? And luckily, we had a lot of things in place that I was able to already leverage, such as how we secure SNMP and how we secure the routers and stuff. That all really translates in really well. So the vendors have it, you know, at a point where you can almost just turn it on and go, but it doesn't take a whole lot. And it worked out really, really well for us in the long run. I also, at the same time for this version, decided to, instead of just cloning the repo into my directory on the jump server and running the scripts out of there, out of that branch, I used a suggestion from somebody else who told me I should package this up and install it on the server directly. So I started making a Debian package with the Gitlab CI/CD pipeline. And then it would get into the Debian package repo that we have internally, and our compute team's Puppet instance would come along and pull it out and install it whenever it saw a new update. I also got a dedicated user account finally. Realized that trying to troubleshoot a problem when you see your username logging into, you know, 20 or 30 different routers every 5 minutes is a little bit of a pain. Having an account where you can see, like, oh, that user's logging in, and you have a little bit more information in there where you can kind of narrow it down to to the script helped a lot. It was easier than beating my head against the wall trying to figure out what I did or what the scripts were doing. So version 3 came about in 2024. This is the third time I've done this presentation. The first time I did this presentation ended with version 3. So in this version, 2024, that year, a buddy of mine kept telling me about async IO Python module, doing asynchronous processing, going and grabbing data from the routers all at once. I had played with threading and things like that in Python. In earlier versions, it was really terrible and didn't work very well. So up until this point, all my scripts are logging into one router at a time, pulling information. And in many cases, that's really, really slow, especially with the LSP data, because it's a lot of information. And I'm pulling it all from one router, parsing it, going on to the next router. Well, I finally got around and started doing asynchronous data collection, and I've got it set to, I could probably set it to pull more than 50 routers, but I got it at 50 routers because that seems like a good place. And a lot of my scripts sped up really, really quick. I also took the opportunity to modularize. I had 15 scripts total, and a lot of them had the same functions. And I decided to learn how to become a little bit more of a software developer and start, making those, condensing those down into just shared functions instead. There was a lot of instances I found in that where I had gotten, as time went on, I'd gotten a little bit better and started making some changes and updates to certain functions, but I never backported any of that. So having to go and fix those earlier scripts to make them work with the newer version, there's a little bit of that going on as well. I also got the bright idea. I've been playing with CI/CD pipelines a little bit more around that time. And I decided, let me put some of these scripts in the pipeline and see how that goes. Maybe I'll just take them off that jump server and just put them in here and let the pipeline handle a lot of that. I created a custom Docker image for that. The one I was using for my other pipeline stuff was a little bulky and it took forever to spin up, and I didn't want to every 5 minutes take 2 minutes to spin up an image just so I can run a script and that's it. And I also created I got a specific runner for my needs. I wanted to make sure it was secure. That runner was going to have access to routers. We don't want it to just be sitting there and have willy-nilly access. We wanted to lock it down and make sure it was only working on, or running on, or the scripts were only running on runners that had access, and make sure nobody else could mess with that. I found out during this process that the pipeline was not the best place for this. A lot of my scripts took 3 or 4 times longer to run during this process, even with the asynchronous Python code. Later on, I didn't mess with it a lot. I had a lot going on, and I was just like, it's not going to work, so I moved on. Later on, I started to realize maybe my runner VM probably just didn't have enough resources, and that's what it kind of came down to. But I'm a network engineer, not really a software developer or a systems guy, so I decided that sometimes you win some and sometimes you lose some, but I was just lost this one, so that's okay. All right, so March of 2025 comes around, and I do version 4. Version 4 had a bunch of logging updates. I completely overhauled how that works so that I could do better troubleshooting. I feel like this is a good escalation and of my skill level, good maturity here. I've done a lot of troubleshooting, made it really, really hard. So I did some updates to improve that. A lot of the original code was pulling out of the SQL database directly. In their intervening time period, the API for that database had started to get a lot more robust. And so I started migrating the last of the SQL to the API. I made some updates with the help of a colleague. We found out that I was using Beautiful Soup to parse a lot of the data. And Beautiful Soup is apparently really slow. And so it's built on top of the LXML module, and we just went native LXML, and that sped things up greatly, especially with the LSP data, which is, again, a large amount of data. And so I also kind of learned how to do some better troubleshooting. My colleague helped me out. He's a little bit more advanced than I am in that area, and figured out how to do some script troubleshooting and measuring times, how long everything takes, but down to the function, even down to the line level. So about 6 weeks ago, there was a problem with my package version 4. It ran great for about 10 months. well, actually almost a year. And then all of a sudden, it starts causing some problems. And this is the first time, I think I've said this out loud, but I DDoSed the API. So I got a little flack for that. But what we did was we decided, OK, well, let's move a lot of this off of the jump server. It's causing us some resource issues anyway. Let's put it on its own server. So another escalation here. And let me figure out, with the logging updates I did in version 4, I was able to figure out very quickly which script was causing the problem. So I was able to shut them all down, got the information from my systems guys, and then went and turned everything except for that one back on. And then I started troubleshooting it and figuring out that some of the code that allows it to stop processing doesn't really kill the process. It kind of gets hung sometimes. So in the process of moving to a dedicated VM, I decided, hey, you know what? It's time. I'm going to merge everything into one repository. And this is where ops telemetry is born. So now we're back at version 1 again, instead of version 5. I also made it a Python module to replace the Debian package, and we have an internal PyPy server. It's uploaded there. Puppet comes around every hour, grabs a new version, puts it in. The Debian package gets installed at a much slower rate, so this is a faster rollout. I can make changes and fixes much faster, too, if I need to. A lot of the code updates, merging everything together. They all have common helper scripts, common structure. So I can just change things once as opposed to 3 times or 15 times. I also added data caching for building the router list. We turn up routers and turn them down quite frequently, especially when we're in projects to replace platforms across the network. But not so frequent that we can't cache it. So and that seems to help the speed as well. And then I added a central config file in a TOML format for that particular package. I found lately I've been using those. Those seem to be working really well for me. All right, so throughout all this, we're going back to small incremental steps. So far, you can see that I've made, I feel like I've made my skill level's kind of gone up as I've gone through this, and I feel like that's a great thing that's been happening to me. But I wanted to kind of see, like, what did I really get out of all this, because taking it individually, there's not a lot going on, it feels like, in my head at least. So I started writing this down and put together Python. I got so much better at Python. There was so much going on. I don't have enough slides or enough time to explain everything that went on with the Python, but I got much better, a lot more confident with it too, which is really good. Third-party Python modules, I used a lot more than this, but these are the ones that if any of you guys in here, or ladies, want to get into network automation but don't know where to start, don't have time, that kind of thing, these are modules I recommend looking at first. NetMiko especially, that's the starting point I suggest. And then Netconf, learning how to deploy it, learning how to use it with Python, learning how XML works in many cases. A lot of devices allow you to pull an XML or JSON. XML is common across all vendors, but learning that was a challenge in itself. How our large data storage system works, that was something that I didn't understand before. There's a lot of things going on in that back end. I don't know a lot about databases really, but I've gotten pretty good with SQL commands dealing with our configuration database. But I learned how to send that data to Kafka. I learned what Kafka was. Actually, I did an interview with Ethan over here a couple of years ago, and I couldn't explain Kafka in that interview, but now I can, so I went and learned that for him. But I also learned a little bit about the database administration and how to administrate the data cubes in the UI itself. Gitlab CI/CD, I learned a little bit more about that. That's some of my projects now have very complicated and convoluted CI pipelines, but they do a lot of automation for me, so I don't have to do a lot of these mundane things. I learned how to work with repositories better. I learned more about pipelines, building Debian packages, went in Python packages too, runner security, things like that. I learned how to work with RESTful APIs. I learned how to build Docker images. I'd already been started building Docker images, but I started, my two or three Docker images are vastly different. I can't just reuse them across, so it's kind of nice to kind of don't want to, you kind of want to reuse images in my opinion, but I like it because they're all built differently. So I get some experience doing things differently than I normally would. And then Python modules. I learned to build Python modules and deploy that to a PyPy server. All right, and all this, with the skills gained, I also learned a few lessons along the way. In my experience, it's really important to understand your tools and what their capabilities are. How do they work? What can you do with them? I found ways to use tools that weren't necessarily expected by the people who were developing that. And we found instances, especially in our configuration system internally, where they go to make changes and all of a sudden something doesn't work the same way anymore, and you have to go explain to them how you were using it. I think it's very important to understand the core tools and their capabilities. You know, you want to get the right tools for the job. You want to invest time in understanding those strengths and weaknesses. And then you also want to do a lot of exploration and experimentation with those tools. Figure out what works, what doesn't work, and if you try something new, just pull it. You know, it doesn't work, pull it back. If you find something new and you want to replace something that's you know, that's working better than something you already have there, don't hesitate. Go replace it. You know, that's what progress is about. Overcome initial challenges with persistence. I am a little hard-headed. Thankfully, I'm I'm more flexible today than I was 5 or 6 years ago. So persistence is one of my, I think, character traits that I'm really proud of. And you know, it's trial and error sometimes. You know, you're not gonna. I tried to learn Python on the internet and stuff like that, and there's a lot of information out there. It's hard to figure out where to start. So I like to work through trial and error, taking examples that work for people and try to make them work for myself. And so, you know, there's a lot of patience that needs to be in that. And I know that this is hard for a lot of network engineers. We don't ever have enough time in the day, and it's very difficult. I mean, it's easy for me to sit up here and go, oh yeah, you should give yourself time to do this. But I think if you're going to get into network automation, or if you're already doing network automation, and you know, somebody asks you how long a project is going to take, you know, building some time for experimentation and iteration. You know, there's no, just give yourself a little bit more time than what you think it will take. I think in many cases you'll find that that's time well spent. So this slide is prioritize structured data and avoid scraping where possible. A lot of people are going to disagree with me. A lot of people get a lot of benefit out of textfsm and those types of tools, and you know what? It's a great tool, don't get me wrong. A lot of this comes from my frustration of dealing with having to learn textfsm. My regex isn't very strong to begin with, so having to fight a lot of that. I did learn eventually why a lot of things weren't working. I submitted almost all of my templates to the network to code repository. I cleaned them up. They rejected so many of my iterations and kept telling me how to fix it and make it better. So I did provide that back to the community because that, to me, that was important. You know, what I needed wasn't there, and I didn't want other people to have to struggle with what I do. But I find that if you, at all possible, getting the structured data from the source is the best way to do it. You want to, these days, you know, every modern router will have an API of some type. It may have 10 APIs. So any way you want to get that data out is probably possible in most cases. It's just kind of table stakes at this point. Learn from your failures and adjust. Not every experiment's going to succeed. And if it doesn't, cool, great. That pipeline didn't succeed for me when I was trying to run scripts for it, but I learned a little bit out of that, and the pipeline works great for many other projects. So, you know, it's not really a loss of time. It's just, you know, it just didn't work for that one. Expand knowledge beyond programming. I think it's important, again, we don't have enough time, so, you know, it's really easy to say this, it's hard to do this, but broadening my skills past data storage, or to conclude data storage visualization and deployment tools that help me understand how those systems work, but also at the same time, the biggest thing I gained out of it is I can go talk to those guys now. I can sit there and go, hey, this is what I need, and give them a ticket, and then they will immediately, I'm using their terminology, their language, they know exactly what I want, And there's no waiting days of going back and forth trying to figure out what I need versus what they can provide. I understand enough of that system that I can sit there and go, I need X, Y, and Z, and they could go, done. And I think that's very helpful, being able to talk to those other teams who handle those systems and understanding what they're dealing with and being able to talk in their terms. So that goes back to what I said earlier, where I wasn't happy getting access to that stats database system, but it worked out in the long run. I've found myself able to communicate to them much more effectively. Focus on long-term value. Automation is an investment in operational excellence and network reliability. As you're doing projects, as you're looking at hardware, identify where automation can help you gain those long-term benefits and then start, working towards that. I have a lot of ideas from the last 5 years of doing automation. I have a very long-term plan that I think we should be going in, and now I get to go start affecting my portion of the plan. I've got many other teams I have to bring into that fold and into that plan and sell that plan too. And as we go into the future and as we do new platforms, I can start to see where those things fit into that plan. I'm probably not going to get my ideal, pipeline and plan going, but I could try. All right, the gist of this whole conversation: start small and iterate. I think even though baby steps is a little condescending in my opinion these days, I think the approach is very shows we can start simple and then gradually over time build our skills and learn to do things a lot more complex. In the meantime, while all this was going on, I was also learning Ansible. I was learning how to upgrade routers automatically with Ansible. I was learning how to upgrade DWDM systems with Ansible. I was learning how to do a bunch of different things with Ansible too. And a lot of this knowledge that I gained from doing this project helped translate over to those projects, and then what I learned there helped come back and translate to this one. I think we should definitely practice or focus on practical needs. Pick something that you do today that's very mundane and you really, like it's the first thing you do in the morning, you come in, you set up your system and, oh, I got to do this thing because, somebody's got to do it. Figure out what that is and start there. If you're not doing automation today, that's the best way to start. You start in one little place and next thing you know, it snowballs and you've got all kinds of things going and you've got yourself doing a lot more free time. And I believe this method allows us to build confidence and avoid being overwhelmed by complexity. I get overwhelmed when a lot of things are being thrown at me, and if I just do something small here, and then something small here, and then find out, oh, I can tie them together, that makes it a lot easier, and next thing you know, you've got this big ecosystem that you didn't imagine ever having to deal with. So for my closing, a couple of years ago, or the last time I did this presentation about 14 months ago, I copied a quote from somebody else's deck that I had heard a few months before that I thought was really rad and would sound awesome. Then I realized I'm not the kind of guy who quotes anybody and I don't know nothing. So I went ahead and took that quote out. But again, I think network automation is just, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's the way to go and you have to do it, but I think it's very helpful to everybody, network engineers. And if you're not doing it today, really take a look at it today and give it a shot and see what you think. There's a bunch of resources out there, and that's it. I got a little bit under 2 minutes left. If anybody has a question, I'm here.
Please feel free. Yeah, make sure you state your name and your affiliation before you can ask a question.
Hey, James from Lyft. My question is this. Basically, I find like when you're building an automation pipeline from scratch, it's like you said, it's like baby steps, and then you start small, and it slowly like kind of snowballs more and more as you find like more problems to solve, right? You're like, oh, I could do this, I could do this. I find something happens. It's like, it's not really like a technical thing. It's like, as you build this out, right, you're on a team, you slowly become kind of like the main brain of this design, right? And it's like hard for your colleagues to kind of like keep them up to date, right? Like slowly you just run away with it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, if you don't do that well, then you become like a single point of failure, almost like, or like the person who owns everything, which.
I have 5 years worth of work that only I know everything about, so I understand completely.
Yeah.
Luckily, I have some of these videos now that I can share around, so that helps. But yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's the same thing as the guys from Arista were saying this morning. Nobody has documentation for anything. All of my projects, all 3 of these, and now ops telemetry, has extensive documentation. If I get hit by the proverbial bus tomorrow, sorry, man. Somebody will find my documentation and be able to pick it up and run with it. A few people know it's there. They've looked at it and went, yeah, it looks good. It makes sense to me whenever I'm trying to get people to vet the docs. But I go overboard in documentation for that reason. It's because at that point, I've done everything I can, and I tell them the documentation is there. And if somebody comes to me later and goes, I don't understand how this works, my first question is, did you read the docs? And if you didn't read the docs, then it's there. Now, if they ask me a question and the information is not in the docs, okay, that's on me. Let's go fix that. So documentation, I think, is the answer to that. And it's really on the individual to keep up as well, in some cases. Also, doing training classes with your colleagues helps as well, if you have time for that. So did that answer everything? Or?
Yeah, that answered. Cool.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep, no problem. All right, and I'm over time now.